Test, test. Test. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please take a seat? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between, to this side event on how to make water pivotal in food systems. This session is online broadcasted live, so also welcome to our online viewers. My name is Karen Anderweg. I'm a team leader of the Water and Food Security team at Wageningen University and Research, and I will be moderating this session today. This session is organized by Wageningen University and Research, the FAO, the Integrated Water Management Institute of the CGIAR, the Climate Resilient Food System Alliance, the World Bank, and the Dutch government. How to make water pivotal in food systems. We all know that food security is one of the greatest challenges of our time. And we also know that water is needed to produce food. But still, water and food are often two separate domains and different themes in research, in policies, in projects. And that's a good reason for today to pay attention to the role of water in food systems. This session today follows a session that we organized at the UN Water Conference in March in New York. It was a conference about water. And of the 100 side events, there were only 2 side events focusing on water. On food, sorry. Water was not that remarkable. So that was a good reason to today, during the UN Food System Summit, to organize a session on water. The aim of this session is not only to stress the importance of water in food systems and the role of water in food security, but because that was also stressed yesterday by several presidents and several prime ministers. But the aim is also to talk about the how. How can we make water pivotal in food systems? Before we start, I would like to know a little bit who's in the room. So who of you works in the food sector? Yeah, I think around 30%. And who of you works in the water sector? Aha. And who works in food and water? A few, okay. Well, that's good to know, thank you. Okay. Before starting with our first speaker, I would also like to thank the FAO for hosting this event and also for the wonderful coordination in the background by everybody helping us to facilitate this session. Our first speaker is Mr. Li-Feng Li. Can you put the next slides, please? 2 slides further. Mr. Li is the director of the Land and Water Division of the Food and Agricultural Organization, and he's leading FAO's work on soils, land, water, geospatial, and climate financing. Mr. Li.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, friends of water and food, welcome to this session. It's a great pleasure to be able to share with you a few thoughts to kick off the discussion for this session. Probably you noticed there's a very limited few sessions during the entire 3 days. That's with the focus on water. Probably we got 2, but no more than 3 events that's really focused on water. Why we need to look at the water? Everybody understand. Food is water, right? Food is water, and we cannot really achieve food security without, seriously look at how water will be managed to produce more food, but also produce other agricultural products, as well as to support other economies. I think the importance of the water has been really recognized a long time ago. For those who work in the water sector, unfortunately, I understand most of you are in the food sector. For those who are in the water sector, you probably remember that in the Rio +20 event, that's the 2012, through the declaration in the Rio, then the language come out from that, it's water is the core, it's the center of sustainable development. I think that's the first time at the global level that water received such high level recognition. It's the similar recognition back to 1992, that the water was in fact, there's a dedicated chapter of the water in the Agenda 21st, which the chapter calls for all the countries to develop a really budgeted work plan around water. So Rio is the place that really highlights the importance of the water. Not only that, since we have the sustainable goal on water in the 2015, then in 2016, UN Water published this report. It's fully recognized how importance of water, to have to achieve not only SDG 6, but also all the other SDGs. Similar on the left, also the scientists put together the paper to say the linkages between water and all the other SDGs. And clearly you can see the bigger of the icon, the icon here, it means the much more close linkages between water and those SDGs, for example, number 2 and number 3. However, as you probably noticed in the food community or in the agriculture community, water is not that important in many occasions. For example, as the outcome 2 years ago, that's 116 countries developed their national pathways for the food system, to the food system transformation. Very interesting. I invited the youth of my division to review all these 116 pathways. And the result come out from that is really surprising. And we found out that, okay, 15% of those pathways didn't mention water at all. While 85% of those food pathways mentioned water, and then we have a closer look, and then we identified only 15% really addressed the water in the food pathways very clearly. The other 27% of them really addressed water somehow clearly. Then basically 1/3 of those food pathways didn't mention water at all. So that is the indication of how these two sectors are so much disconnected, even though we say, food is water. The team then dive into this, look at the 10 indicators, 10 indicators from data, from the governance, from a social perspective, institutional perspective, to see how what's the level of the integration. And we only found that only on a number of the indicators, the integration is relatively high. For example, on the institutional arrangement, for example, for the water footprint, for example, on data quality and monitoring. In many other perspectives, the integration level is very low, and there's no one single country have achieved a high level of integration between water and agriculture or their food pathways. So learning from that, recognize that, and also learning from other sectors, also in the climate sectors, in the energy sectors, we think FAO, we might be able to have to change that situation by promoting a national water roadmaps. A national water roadmaps is sort of a comprehensive plan, not only about how to achieve SDG 6, but also how water should be really used and managed to achieve all the SDGs. So really look at the entirety of the 2030 agenda. And that's sort of a roadmap should really build upon the commitment that countries already expressed through the NDCs, through the NARPs, through the energy vision, food pathways, and many other sectoral work plans and water plans. But also we encourage countries to really not only develop this document, but also really in the process of the development of this roadmaps to bring all the other sectors onto the same platform, into the same room like this, to discuss how water should be really used and managed to achieve all the SDGs in the future. And further to that, we proposed a sort of a technical framework. And at the beginning of that kind of pathway, we really want to encourage the countries to recognize the water, the value of the water, and set up the high-level principles about how water should be valued, how water should be managed, and then come up with a sort of national water vision. And then following that, we also encourage the countries to look at the existing strategic objectives that's already reflected in the different sectoral plans, and then come up with the specific outcomes that's linked up to the SDG indicators and the target. We also look at the SDG 6 acceleration framework, accelerators, 5 accelerators, and proposed that all these 5 accelerators could be a part of this national water roadmap. So the roadmap could also include the prioritize the water investment plans that's addressing the financial issues. Also look at the data information capacity and innovations, which will be part of the action plan initiatives and also programs, as well as look at the partnerships and governance issues in the roadmap. I missed one slide, but it doesn't matter. Since then, so we officially raised these issues through the Rome Water Dialogue last year, and we continue to promote this Rome Water, the roadmap, and organizing the regional workshops in Africa. We're also planning the other regional workshops for Asia, for Latin America. And this is also one of the FAO's 8 commitment to the UN 2023 Water Conference. I'm also very happy to share with you that at the beginning of this month, water for the first time made the agenda of FAO conference. And this is for the first time, FAO is really bring the water and food agenda together. And hopefully through the National Water Roadmap, we can really help the countries to seek the integrated solutions to food, to water, to climate, and many other challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. You've shown again that although we know water is crucial for food production, that we still have some water blindness in our policies and also in our national food transformation pathways that are a core product of this UN Food System Summit. And I would also like to thank you for your ongoing efforts of bringing water to the attention of the food system policies. Thank you. Next speaker is Professor Petra Hellegers. She's the full professor and chair of the Water Resources Management Group of Wageningen University and Research. Petra.
Thank you very much, Karen. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to speak here today. Well, although water has been recognized as an enabler for transformation of food systems, it's surprising that water is not pivotal yet in the design of our food systems. And in my presentation, I would therefore like to address the various actions towards a water responsible food system. But before I do so, let me first emphasize the various connections between water systems and food systems. The water system and the food system, and the role of agriculture as the largest user of fresh water withdrawal. Well, this figure shows that the water cycle is complex as well as the food system, and that there are various connections. And that also makes it very difficult to navigate change. And I really think that the food systems approach can help us to navigate this complexity. I think most of us know already that irrigated agriculture is responsible for 70% of the fresh water withdrawal. But what's even more interesting is that rain-fed agriculture uses 3 times more water than irrigated agriculture. And what does that mean? That means that food systems are extremely vulnerable to water scarcity, but also to climate change, which will make water even more scarce. And water is not pivotal yet in the design of a food system. And I really think that that's a shared responsibility of all actors in the food system. So not just the farmer in terms of sustainable production, but also the traders, which can make the local implications of their trade visible. But also of us as consumers, because are we aware what the implications are of our diets for water consumption? And do we realize that food waste is also water wastage? But also the financial institutions, if they give loans, are there sustainability checks in these loans? As well as the governments. Do we have clear regulations and the right incentives in place? And do we have a clear prioritization of the water allocation? But also companies in the food sector, are they aware of their water footprint? Well, to make it a shared responsibility, we have launched during the UN Water Conference in New York, this global working group on water and food. And we really aimed to bring together all the actors in the food system and use a systems approach to take responsibility and to formulate various actions. And here you can see all the institutions which participate. And if you're interested, let us know, because feel free to join. We will meet on the 27th and the 28th of September in Wageningen. So yeah, this is an open invite. If you like to join, feel free to join. As a working group, we have defined already some actions towards water responsible food systems. And they are related to improving the resilience of water and food systems, but also to making the local implications of global trade visible. Actions related to water reallocation on the basis of water valuation, but also actions related to the change of our diets. And I will elaborate on these 4 sets of actions. Well, the first one, to improve the resilience of water and food systems, it's important to have drought resilient seeds, for instance, but also to increase the soil moisture content of the soils. But also climate and management information is key, as well as reliable water services to the farmers to save water. But water can also be used as a guiding principle for the planning. Well, the second one, food trade can, of course, in theory, mitigate water scarcity. Yeah? However, what we see is that many countries are very vulnerable to changes in trade, to food prices, and to changing geopolitics. And as a result of that, food trade may not materialize. What we have seen, for instance, the last 5 years, that impacts of shocks in one country can be transmitted to other countries, for instance, via export restrictions, which shows the importance of having an open economy and no trade restrictions. And I really think that global collaboration is key to materialize the trade scenario and to save water. A third one is a clear which is important, I think, for all governments, to have a clear prioritization of the water allocation, preferably based on insights in the trade-offs of the multiple values of water. And I really would like to emphasize here that there is a difference between the financial value of water for food and the societal value of water for food. Because it's often water for food for the production of stable crops is often considered as low value. But if you look at the value of water for stability in a region, it's high value. So maybe the value, the financial value is low, but the socio-economic value of water for stable crop production is high. And finally, I think it's important that consumers become more aware of what the implications of their diets are for water use. And the Eat Lancet diet, but also the Italian diet, has a lower water footprint. So it's also important that consumers are aware of that, of what the implications of the diets are. Well, what is needed for these actions? Well, I think it's very important that we all speak a common language, that we have reliable data and the right metrics. Capacity building is important, but also aligned water, energy, food and trade policies. And what we now often see is that as incentives for one, for instance, for food, but which are not very helpful to save water. But also circular water use is important. Well, the take-home messages. I really think that water and food security are important in times of instability. And that the idea of food trade might mitigate water scarcity is appealing, but that geopolitical interests may dominate these water concerns. And I really hope that we will reassess the societal value of water in terms of food security, when we're making trade-offs in water allocation, not just focus on the financial value of the water for food production, but also on this societal value, which is way higher than the financial value. Yes, and if you like to accompany us on our journey, let us know. It would be nice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petra. You mentioned again that water responsible food systems are not only a responsibility of farmers, but of all actors in the food system. We have invited different actors from the food system. We have a panel discussion with Elizabeth Nisimadala. Elizabeth couldn't join in person, so she's here with us online. This immediately makes it a little bit exciting for a moderator, because does it work, yes or no? Elizabeth, can you hear us? Fortunately, we have perfect technicians here. Yes, hi, Elizabeth. Yes. We can see your face.
Good. How are you?
Hi, how are you doing? Nice that you can join
I'm
online.
Good. I can hear you.
And we can hear you loud and clear. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mrs. Gita Sethi and Miss Julie van der Blink. But I would like to start with you, Elizabeth. You are a farmer in Uganda, but you are also the president of the East African Farmer Federation and representing the African constituency on the board of the World Farmers Organization. Wow, congratulations with that.
Thank you.
So you are here in this panel to represent the farmers in the food system, but I would like to start with asking you a more personal question on what are your challenges as a farmer with water?
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Let me first of all start by standing on the prevailing protocols. My fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a great pleasure for me to join you virtually from Uganda. As I've been introduced, I'm a Ugandan. And of course, I would have loved to be there physically, but I was not able to secure a visa appointment on time. And of course, let me start by paying tribute to the co-organizers of this important side event and for really highlighting the importance of water in food systems dialogue, given that only a third of the national pathways talk about water. And yet, this is a very important issue because you cannot talk about food production without mentioning the importance of water. So, Madam Moderator, I would like to, of course, highlight challenges when it comes to the issue of water, and these challenges are around water availability, they're around water access, and they're also around infrastructure. And as you all know, maybe from personally from Uganda, right from childhood, we were always taught that water is life. Of course, which literally means that any living thing or any living things, be it people, be it plants, be it animals, need water to survive. And of course, every farmer really aspires to improve the quality of their soil and ensure that there is enough high quality water for their plants and also for their animals. That's what we always do on the farm, making sure that before you plant, you have to make sure that there is enough water that are going to sustain your plants. If you're an animal farmer, you have to make sure that you have access to water that is going to sustain your animals. So there is no farming without soil and without water. We cannot talk about agriculture if really we can't talk about water and soil. And in this sense, by the very nature of our farming, we have to make sure that we preserve water in the soils. And we've always done this through, for example, practices like mulching, through the growing of cover crops to make sure that we retain soil and nitrogen in the soil. but also making sure that you know, we have, let's say, terraces, we have contours, you know, around our farms. So farmers, don't look at us as only food producers. We are also stewards of natural resources. And it's very key that as farmers, we start identifying ourselves as such and in a broader society by engaging with other, you know, water value chain actors, but also, you know, making sure that there's adequate, sorry, there's got adequate recognition of water in food systems discussions. So as a farmer in Uganda and a farmer representative for the Africa constituency, like you've mentioned, because I represent Africa constituency on the board of World Farmers Organization. And of course, with the vast knowledge and experience of the agriculture sector on the continent, I really have a very keen interest in ensuring that we have efficient and productive use of water on our farms and sufficient and equitable access of water for all the farmers. This is especially true with the advance of climate change. And as farmers face the dual threat of water scarcity and extreme weather events, of course, through innovative water management strategies and techniques, we need to make sure and emphasize that farmers have access to water. So what we are doing is that we are helping our farmers you know, to understand water conservation while reducing soil erosion. As farmers organizations, we are training our farmers on other options for water, because mainly when we talk of water, we from that is provided by governments. But then we tend to forget about water which is provided by nature, the rainwater. So what we've done as farmers organizations is to make sure that we create awareness around those water options and try to train our farmers to be able to harvest water using, of course, different technologies. And this would help them in substituting the issue of water shortages, especially for those who are farming in areas that are far from rivers and also far from lakes.
Yes,
And
thank you, Elizabeth. You're showing, telling us about some wonderful actions that farmers can take to preserve water in the soil, but also as farmers as natural resource managers. And what do you need? Because you gave some examples of actions that farmers can take, but what do you need as farmers to materialize those actions? What do you need from other actors in the food system?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, when it comes to what we need as farmers, I think, first of all, we have to look at finance and technology. Farmers around the world are developing and adopting climate smart water management technologies, and these are aimed at protecting livelihoods and produce the food that we eat. And some are using different technologies like the drip irrigation, the sprinklers, among others. So we need to see a great investment in these innovative solutions, and also allow farmers to have access to these, to some of the latest technologies and innovations. And these, of course, we know that they would help a lot in terms of, you know, increasing food production and also putting, helping in tracking zero hunger SDG. Some farmers, especially in Africa, are dependent on rain-fed agriculture, of course, which increases the risk when it comes to food loss. There's need for capacity. We need to create awareness. Farmers need information. We need to have innovative and affordable financing models, which can allow easy access to some of these technologies. I think one of the previous speakers also talked about policy and governance. Of course, with increasing water scarcity and risks to agricultural production as well as social cohesion, There's a need to develop national risk management response strategies, and this should be coupled with financial and other support mechanisms to empower farmers in a changing climate. Governments should put in place policies that can subsidize water and allow easy access of water for agriculture by farmers while protecting biodiversity. Of course, farmers and our organization structure should be involved in the assessment of the situations and identification of some of these priorities. For example, in Uganda, we've seen efforts by our government to stop, let's say, farmer encroachment on water bodies and also on wetlands. Some farmers' crops have been, destroyed. But in some cases, we've also seen governments, for example, giving out wetlands to some of the investors. And of which, for me, on this, it looks like, double standards, because such policies should be cutting across everyone, not only hindering just the local farmers and then, protecting the investors. And then as a last point, we also need to look at partnerships and cooperation. And I'm happy that the previous speakers have really called on us to really partner on this discussion around water. And of course, we all know it's a common problem. It really requires joint solutions. And according to a landmark report by the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, global freshwater demand will outstrip supply by 40% by the year 2030. So it's not just a finance or technological problem, nor can it be solved by one actor. This is a water crisis which cannot be overcome without, improved collaboration among the different stakeholders. All of us need to come on the same table. Especially what before may have been considered like, the opposing groups, for example, the farmers, the environmentalists. We all need to sit on one table to see how we can contribute to addressing this challenge. We need a multi-stakeholder approach.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Level.
Thank you so much for your wonderful contribution. And I think also your comments on partnerships, on policies, and on finance are very well noted. So thank you very much for bringing this on the table. And you immediately make a very nice bridge to the next panelist, Dr. Geeta Sethi. You are advisor and global lead for food systems at the World Bank. You have been a lead architect on the World Bank's food system transformation agenda. And you also contributed recently to the interesting report on detox development, on repurpose of subsidies, which touches very nicely on the comments of Elizabeth. Based on your experience and also on the recent report that you have written, how can financial institutions take actions to make water pivotal in food systems?
Thank you. And good afternoon. A great pleasure to be here and with such a august panelists and an audience. Before I start, I want to first congratulate the organizers, because as Petra mentioned, that agriculture and food production uses 70% or 68% of fresh water. And yet we talk about, we optimize two silos. Rarely do we bring these two agendas together. And to think about water resilient food system, I think is exactly the right pivot, particularly with what we've seen this week in terms of the urgency that countries are needing for action. Again, I just want a point of departure to what our farmer colleagues said from Uganda in terms of what do farmers need. For a water resilient food system or a water resilient agriculture and food system, the agriculture and food can no longer be a single business enterprise. So the 21st century farmer has to be not just a producer of food, but also guardian of eco services and be able to provide renewables and be awarded and rewarded for these efforts. Effectively, the 21st century farmer looks towards 3 revenue streams. And I think that is critical in terms of really farmers being central to this transformation. Okay, back to my institution and what we are doing. the report we've done. So what's the issue? Really confronting when we say food systems is broken, food systems is creating a bankrupt planet and unhealthy people, and inequities are growing. I think the incentives in the food sector are completely distorted. Today, globally, food systems gets public support of 800 billion. Public support is very critical to ensure equities and manage the market failure. But what our work has shown is that 60% of this is distorting incentives, because it's very much coupled towards either input subsidies or for specific commodities. And as a result, it creates a disincentive for farmers. Thank you very much. It creates a disincentive for farmers in terms of input usage, creates a environment for increased deforestation, environmental distress, et cetera, et cetera. We also know that today, only 45% of fertilizer actually gets absorbed by the crops. The rest goes and pollutes waterways. And our recent numbers indicate that 17% of nitrogen pollution in waterways is exactly perfectly correlated to the input public subsidy support that the governments are getting. And it has then a permanent human capital loss, where countries that have higher input subsidies are facing high insecurity and are creating productivity losses in their labor force. So it's all, very much integrated in our approach. And so that has been a big focus in terms of really getting the repurposing agenda. Governments should support the sector, no issues, but support it with the right objectives, because right now the objectives are very distorted. So that's sort of one big agenda that we are doing in countries. And I think today we are in about 48 countries trying to bring in repurposing for climate smart. So decoupling the current subsidies and moving into some climate smart outcomes. I think the second agenda, which again, water is central to adaptation, food loss and waste, right? 70% of fresh water is used for food, of which 30% or 35% is lost, which means 25% of water being used is effectively lost. And so a big focus for us has been also to understand commodity specific, geographic specific, what's happening on the food loss and waste, what are the drivers, and therefore the interventions, and agrologistics being a very important part of this agenda. And agrologistics, because it's food loss and waste. If some of you have heard me before, if it was a country, it would have been the third highest emitter of global greenhouse gas emissions. So clearly there's a global public good here, why addressing losses and waste needs public support. So that's sort of the second big area that we are focusing. I think the third is on addressing salinity. Whereas agriculture affects water, water also affects agriculture, and all of it combined is really creating a climate crisis, and there's a race almost to adapt. No? So through very targeted investments in terms of coastal land management, mangroves, to really ensure that seawater is kept at bay and agricultural land doesn't get lost is another third big area that we are focusing on in the institution. So let me stop there and turn it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gita. So there are 3 points on your agenda that you would like to see materialize. But then my question to you is, what do financial institutions need to support this? And what can they do?
That's an excellent question. And I'm saying it's excellent because I'm organizing my thoughts. Okay. Today, if you look at the numbers being presented this week on the clip that was shown yesterday, a resilient food systems transformation is about 400 billion a year for the next 10 years. The World Bank's current portfolio is about 28 billion. and we invest 5 to 6 billion a year in the food sector. This number may look big, but it is very small compared to what the needs are. So again, going back to what you presented and what the farmer colleague talked about, that a very different kind of a partnership, okay? And I want to call it a compact. The first is a compact between the public and the private sector. Government finance, if repurposed, plus development finance, plus philanthropy, comes in with seed capital, but it's a de-risking. They can't keep coming in with seed capital. Private sector needs to come in and use this opportunity that when some kind of a de-risking or a seed capital is provided, or tell us what is it they need in place to mitigate the risk that they perceive. So I think that's something very critical in terms of private finance moving in. And that's something we would need to keep this transformation at pace and urgency and ambition that's needed. The second is governments need to be very, the governments need to understand the issue is not public support. The issue is what that public support outcome is. Right now, it's not fit for purpose. So very much a repurposing agenda. That's the third. I think the third is consumers, the demand side, where you touched upon as well, that the consumers need to get more sensitive in terms of their action, whether it's on diets, whether it's about school meals and nutrition, to really get this whole systemic shift to happen. Thank you very much.
Rita. I would like to proceed with Ms. Julie van der Bleek. Julie, you are the director of the multilateral and bilateral innovative finance and resource mobilization of the CGIAR. But you also works for over 20 years for the Integrated Water Management Institute, also of the CGIAR. And before this side event, Julie, you told us that in your organization, which is a research organization, also water was often not really connected with food and agriculture domain, and that the whole organization went through a journey to change that. Could you elaborate a little bit on what you think is needed for research organizations in general to make water and food more connected?
Thank you. I wish we were there with the journey, but the journey has just started. But so yeah, and that is the integrate. And so I don't know if people know the CGIAR. You should, because it is the largest agricultural research organization. But we have changed our mandate to innovations in food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. And I think this is where the heart of our new ideas are laying, and that is that we are looking at food, land, and water systems and bringing those all together. And we've just started this journey. So coming from the International Water Management Institute and now being part of the overall CGIAR, it's been really interesting to observe and to see how different parts of our organization, which consists of 12 research organizations and then an overarching organization, how they look at where water sits and how, and I mean, everybody would say, and we've heard Elizabeth say this, we've heard everybody say this, it's a no-brainer. When you do agriculture, you need water. However, where you sit and at which scale, at which level. So whether you're a crop breeder, you work with crops, or whether you work at farm level or field level or basin level or national level, you have very different ideas about that. Like how important, or how do you think of water and food in food systems? So a crop breeder, we really look at breeding drought-resistant crops, whereas somebody on a farm would look at the actual water management on that farm. Then you have irrigation skills, etc., irrigation schemes, etc. So you have very different viewpoints, very different disciplines, very different incentives, and also very different barriers. So it's that realization. And so for us, I mean, originally when I come from the International Water Management Institute, and then you talk with crop breeders and they're like, yes, of course, we've included this all because we're breeding drought resistant or salinity resistant crops. So we're dealing with climate change and water, but that is not sufficient because whichever scale you go to, there are other trade-offs to be made. There are other interactions, there are other actors, there are other sectors. So you need to kind of have that realization that that there can be that you need to have these different entry points. So I think that is really important, and that is something that is seeping through in our integrated research programs and is much better understood now. So I think that's those scales. Realizing, you know, the interventions are different, everything is different at these different scales, but how they impact each other is crucial. Water scarcity in a much more complex world now, and with a climate crisis, is also something which makes us realize that you cannot do without systems thinking. You have to look at, and the food and the water systems interact a lot, but they're also different in a way. So it is so important that you recognize them both. And you cannot do without collaboration. So you need to collaborate, we all within our organization, but also, as Gita also mentioned, with the private sector, with governments, etc. So I think that is what is really important. Also the collaboration, which was also mentioned already a few times, between research, science, the policy interface and investments, so that you are able to inform through scientific evidence, the policy decisions which are taken. But even there, I mean, if you look at, if you're taking a policy decision or an investment from a water perspective or purely or from a food perspective, and depending on which sector you're in, you might actually be clashing in terms of the outcomes. So I think that again, systems thinking is crucial.
Julie, and it sounds quite easy if you talk about it. Eh? We need collaboration and we need systems thinking. But of course, you also mentioned the trade-offs on the different skills and actors. And I was just wondering, what do you think the research community need to actually start the systems thinking and start collaborating? Because also working for a research organization, I know it's not a natural thing to collaborate a lot.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that. Is it a natural thing to collaborate or not? It is not always, but I think what one of the key drivers for many people is that they want to see impact and positive impact. So in particular, working with the CGIAR, where we work on a more applied research agenda. So I think that collaboration, working also more with different partners inside and outside the water and food sectors is crucial, and people are seeing the value of that. For example, working with financial institutions or credit institutions to ensure that, I mean, Elizabeth was mentioning what is the key things that she needed. So they needed finance, technology, access to information, and to innovations. And so if you don't bring these different actors together, that is not going to happen. So I think that's crucial. You need leadership who understands this. I think that is really crucial for your organization and for other organizations to bring them together. Another point which I just wanted to raise there is in terms of what you need is that you need to also see agriculture as a solution. Okay, it uses 70% of the water, fine. We're in a water scarce environment, but it is also, agriculture is a solution. It's a solution in terms of mitigation, in terms of adaptation. We can look at efficiencies, circular economy. There are so many possibilities. So that's another kind of entry point which we need to have. And in terms of then going back again to climate action, so with these different trade-offs, etc., I think it's also that not all climate action is necessarily sustainable because it doesn't take the impacts in these different sectors and these different resources into account. So that's again something we need to assess it carefully, these trade-offs, and understand how we can act better in a more concerted manner.
It coincides very well with what Petra was saying about the global working group on water and food, in which we aim to collaborate between different actors in the food system, because we here today had people from the farming community, from the financial institutions, from research, but not the consumers, and not yet the governments. We've not yet heard them, but also not the traders and the other private sector. So we aim to bring them all together in our global working group on water and and food, for which you are cordially invited to join. Gita, you raised your finger to make a very short remark.
Very short. Just a point that Julie raised in terms of innovation, research and innovation. A few days ago, Guardian had an article on climate from the climate scientists, and what they said, we had been talking about this heat wave and everywhere globally, that this kind of temperature increase, which is 1.3 degrees, happened 125,000 years ago. Agriculture started about 10,000 years ago, which means where we are today, we haven't been before. And agriculture today is an uncharted territory. So you asked me, what do I need? What do we need for things to happen? Julie talked about research and innovation. Countries, governments put 1% of their ag GDP towards research and innovation. Very specific ask. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a very concrete question. Well, talking about government, I would like to go over to someone representing also a government institution. We've heard different perspectives today, but I would like to hear from His Excellency Marcel Beukenboom, Dutch Permanent Representative to the United Nations of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have also a track record in sustainability diplomacy, and I'm very curious to hear from you. What are your concluding remarks or take-home messages on how can we make water pivotal in food systems?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for that introduction, and thank you to this panel for the very interesting remarks, which I try to connect to each other in some closing remarks. But first, maybe a few things that have not been said, but I think that are messages that we could take to heart. And that is one, that the broad coalition that is organizing this event is a good message in itself. And I think several panelists refer to that. This is something about collaboration and breaking silos. And I think that the message that is being sent here by that is a positive one. Like also the composition of the panel, and you see the pictures here. This is an all-female panel. And I think that is a good sign as well. This gender and female participation is something that has long been overlooked. And I think the water sector has long been also a male-dominated sector. So this is a good message as well. So thank you for that as well. And then finally, it's maybe a metaphor of the water sector is the bridge. And several speakers, and I think including the opening remarks, were about bridging those different sectors and connecting those dots to each other. And I think that is crucial that we keep on doing that. When I was posted in the United States, and that's over 10 years ago, we were involved and asked by the United States to help in the aftermath of the hurricane that struck Louisiana. And we organized the so-called Dutch dialogues. And my colleague in the embassy who was dealing with that, he taught me an interesting lesson, and I think, Julie, you referred to that in a way as well, is where you stand depends on where you sit. And that always stuck with me, because it really tells you that the way we look at things is really depending on your own interests, on your beliefs, on how you are involved in an issue. And now we are slowly progressing towards systems thinking, and this whole summit these days is about that. We have to slowly detach ourselves from that place where we sit and try to also listen to the others and understand where the other is coming from. And that, to me, underscores the title of this side event on making water pivotal. But it also is a message to the people that come from the water sector. Leave that a little bit behind, because you have to understand where the other is coming from and how we can make it a part and parcel of what we do. Because too many in this field, and I think all panelists did that as well, is underscore the importance of water, which is absolutely true. But others would say, my theme is also important, so don't forget that. And that is a little segue to what Lily Feng said, is that there is a lot of water blindness here. I would add to that, it's not only blindness, it's also not smart if you do that, because and several of the speakers use that as well, is without water nothing grows. So it's almost an open door to kick in, but it's crucial to underscore that and underscore the title of this seminar. I'll quickly run through a few other things that have been said and I think are worth repeating. First of all, the slide that was shown by Professor Helliger's, what I would call the spaghetti bowl slide. That spaghetti bowl with water in the middle had all the connections to all the other themes, and that is good to take to heart, but also underscores how complicated it sometimes can be. So that shared responsibility that she also mentioned is also a shared responsibility to explain and to others what it means for them, but also understand where they come from. And with that, I also repeat the term language that was in her presentation. Understanding and speaking each other's language is absolutely crucial. Then next point, alignment. Alignment of policies is indeed important, but I would like to add to that I think we should zoom out here as well and look at the system, and alignment of our common efforts is as crucial as well, including the ones of donors and the finances that they make available. Don't earmark them too much, because the system itself should, in the system itself, it should find its way, not necessarily because where you sit, you define where the money should go to. Few more things, I'll just mention them. Partnerships, you will hear that in any panel here in the building. Collaboration is key, partnerships are key, of course they are, but the how question, how you do that is something that we sometimes need to learn. I think that also is underscored by several of the panelists. I discern very much an openness here to do that and to connect with others, but it's definitely a treat that we still have to learn in this system that we are trying to change, and the systems thinking that we are trying to learn. That finally, I get back to the beginning of what I said, those Dutch dialogues and the role that I had and that we had as diplomats in this case, in the aftermath of a water disaster in the United States. To a Dutch diplomat, you could say water has always been pivotal to what we do. It's a little bit in our DNA. And I remember that the next hurricane that struck the United States, Sandy, that hit New York, it was then President Obama who said, call the Dutch. Of course, that makes us very proud that people call the Dutch, but that should no longer be the case. You should call your own local authorities. You should know. And that is, I think, a journey. And I'm back to you, Julie, that knowledge is key to this. And we as the Dutch are really there to share that knowledge. But to be honest, water and water management in the Netherlands is no longer the same as it used to be, where we have always been busy in keeping the water out. All of a sudden, we have to learn how to keep the water, because drought is a feature of the current Dutch water system as well. So keep on learning, keep on reaching out, and keep on collaborating, because water is pivotal to everything we do. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Marcel. So we've come to the end of this session. We've been cordially asked to move out quickly so that the other side events can come in. So sorry for this very abrupt end. Thank you for attending. And if you want to stay tuned,